Okay, as promised, we're going to spend a little bit time, a little bit of time talking about the newborn a little bit and an overview of occupational therapy with children and families. First of all, let's talk about the appearance of a newborn baby. There's a tremendous media misrepresentation. If you're watching TV, a movie, a TV show, whatever it is, oftentimes the baby that if there's a birth happening, the baby that's shown or represented is, I always laugh that they look 3 months old and they're totally clean. And that's not what a newborn baby looks like. Um, Oftentimes, their head can be unusually shaped because the head is soft, and as a result of the passage through the birth canal, there can be an unusually shaped head, and depending on the method of delivery, can be more or less misshapen. The eyelids can be swollen. Sometimes the eyes may be open or shut. There can be broken blood vessels in the whites of the eyes or on the skin. They can have superficial marks. The head is large in comparison to the body, and the face is often small in comparison to the head. And that's one of the features that is makes a baby more appealing. Is this, kind of the size of the face. But we think of them. Everybody always says, "Oh, your baby is so beautiful. Your baby is so cute." But I love babies, but in actuality, they really aren't that attractive in most cases right after they're born. Um, so I have to laugh. We're talking about the media misrepresentation, and this is where you're going to get into a little bit more um, about me than you might hope for sometimes. But um, it just happens to be, I have two children, and both times in the hospital, it happened to be that on the television in the delivery room were people giving birth. So my son was born in 1987, which is way before many of you guys. But his birth was a little bit longer. I was in the hospital for not too long in comparison, but um, it happened to be that my water broke first, so I had to get to the hospital. He was 3 weeks early. Before that, he had been breech, meaning that his butt side was down rather than his head. When I got to the hospital, they found out that he had rotated, so he was in the right position, but they were concerned that he was going to rotate back. So I had to have an internal monitor on his head to make sure that he stayed in the position that he was supposed to be in. That meant I couldn't move around a lot. So I was kind of confined to a bed for the, we'll say, 14-ish hours that I was at the hospital. So not much to do but watch TV. So it happened to be back then there wasn't much on television in the afternoon except soap operas, and so the hospital was playing a particular soap opera called One Life to Live, and at that time, there were two women stuck in a cabin out in the woods with no way to get out. And one of them happened to go into labor, the one who was pregnant, not the other one. So this is what I'm watching as I am in labor. I'll show you briefly. So the baby's coming. So here we are. We're in a here you can see on the top. We're in a jungle cabin in Argentina in 1987, and we're about to give birth. And we are 3 minutes into this clip, and that baby is coming fast and furious. Here we are. 5 minutes in and we're getting ready to push. And there he is, 3 months old and totally clean in this jungle cabin in Argentina. 7 minutes into the clip, I can tell you my first birth didn't go that quickly. My second birth was closer to that. But the miraculous birth of this 3 month old baby that is totally clean. So let's go to the second clip, which was a little bit more interesting because my daughter was 5 weeks early and she was born in 1989. And with my first birth, because my water broke, they actually had to induce me. So they gave me a drug to speed up labor. And then I had an epidural, which is a pain reliever. And when I came out of the epidural, I was fully dilated and he was ready to be born. So I didn't ever really feel the traditional labor pains like you saw in that first video clip. So I didn't really know what it felt like. So with my second child, I didn't really realize I was in labor because I hadn't experienced it the way that you would typically experience it. So I waited and I called people and I watched at the time, those of you who are a little bit older will appreciate or remember the Jane Fonda pregnancy video. I watched that to see if that was what was happening and what I could do, etc. So finally, it got to be late at night and I decided I probably was in labor. So we arrived at the hospital at 11:59 p.m. and my daughter was born at 12:11 a.m. So if you do the math, that's 12 minutes that I was at the hospital between coming in the door and giving birth. So that's could be the reason I only have 2 children. But despite it only being 12 minutes, the TV was on in the labor room, which also happened to be Super Bowl Sunday. I recall my daughter, literally, I pushed 3 times and she was just over 5 pounds. So I always joke that the obstetrician caught the winning pass on Super Bowl Sunday. But here's the video. If any of you were Star Trek fans, Star Trek The Next Generation, Deanna Troi was giving birth as I was giving birth. And she still had the child faster than I did, despite me being in the hospital for 13 minutes or 12 minutes. So we have to wait for this. So here we go. Her pregnancy literally lasted 36 hours, but she's not a human. So let's so her 36-hour pregnancy was much faster than mine or any human being, but as I said, she is not human. So here we go. I'm going to fast forward to her labor. So first of all, I'm in pain giving birth because I certainly didn't have time for any medications, and she's giving birth having no pain whatsoever. And here we go. And there it is, a totally clean, maybe not quite 3 month old baby, but probably not quite a newborn baby. So those are my birth experiences that I wanted to share. Um, just kind of funny that in both experiences, I was watching childbirth happen. And despite the fact that I was only in for 12 minutes with my daughter, the birth on TV still was much faster and easier than what I was experiencing. So, getting back to the appearance of a newborn's body. So, when they're born, um, babies are often covered with substances called vernix and lanugo. Now, vernix is kind of a cheesy like substance, and what it does, there's a lot of theories about what the purpose of vernix has been, and generally it's believed that it protects the skin from the acidic quality of the amniotic fluid, but it also helps the baby be able to make its way through the birth canal a little bit easier. So, it's kind of it's considered a cheesy like substance, but it's really an important thing. Lanugo, a baby may or may not be born with lanugo, and lanugo is a downy like hair. It's usually gone before birth, but sometimes it's still present at birth. So it's not a problem either way. You tend to see it a little bit more in newborn babies. Premature babies. But the purpose of the lanugo, this downy like hair, is to hold on to the vernix. So it helps that baby be able to maintain that, the external environment from the womb is a much harsher environment than the baby's used to. So this vernix and lanugo can help keep the skin, protect the skin from the environment, whether it's in the womb or outside of the womb. Oftentimes, the breasts or the genitals can be swollen. The umbilical cord juts out, and it's a dark purple. You have to wait. That eventually does fall off if you've had any experience with newborn babies. They can have sensitive skin, and there can be some discoloration. There can be some birthmarks, something called cradle cap, which is like a scaly stuff that's on top of their head. They can have milia, or these little pimple-like eruptions, and there can be some change in pigmentation. My daughter, who, as I said, was 5 weeks early, was had a pretty distinctly red hue to her skin. Her newborn baby pictures don't necessarily look like she belongs in our family. She's quite her skin is much darker than eventually it lightened up. This is what we see. So we think of babies as these beautiful, or newborn babies as these beautiful little beings, and they do become these beautiful little beings very fairly quickly. But this is how we often perceive them right after they're born, anyway. But this is what we actually get. This you can see the vernix. You can see the umbilical cord jutting out. The eyes are closed. Okay, that's what we get. But we love them anyway. So healthy full-term newborn babies can breathe independently. They can feed at delivery or moments thereafter. They pretty quickly can do that, and that's as a result of physiological reflexes that help them be able to seek out food. And we're going to talk about these reflexes next week, but rooting and sucking are two of the reflexes that go together that cause them to be able to seek food. They can latch on, a healthy newborn baby can latch on and be able to obtain nourishment. They need sensory stimulation, so that holding and cuddling and rocking and talking are all really important for the development of the baby, but also bonding with the caregiver. They begin to communicate with some nonverbal language. Parents will always tell you that they know what their baby's cries mean after a relatively brief period of time. Babies have distinct cries for when they're wet or for when they're hungry, and caregivers are generally able to differentiate what those cries are. So that's the beginning of nonverbal language. That's the beginning of communication. But regardless, these babies change a family's life forever.